Have you ever wondered how many dreams have died? Not because they were impossible, but because someone was too afraid to try. What if I told you that fear is nothing more than a prison built by your own mind? And every day you stay in it, you surrender your power to become who you were born to be. You did not come here merely to survive under the weight of anxiety. You came to break free. Today, you're going to learn how to tear down the walls of fear that have stood in your way for far too long. And by the end of this message, you will understand not only why fear controls you, but how to dismantle it so you can finally transform your life. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover could change everything. Fear is a master deceiver. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It tells you you're not good enough, that you're unprepared, that you will fail, that rejection is inevitable. And because you listen to its quiet voice, you stop taking risks, you shrink your vision, and you convince yourself that smallness is safety. But the truth is, fear is a liar. It promises protection, but it delivers paralysis. It pretends to shield you, but it robs you of the very experiences that would make your life extraordinary. Every human being carries fear. Some fear failure, others fear success, some fear loneliness, others fear exposure, but all fear has one thing in common: it thrives in darkness. Fear cannot survive the light of awareness. Transformation begins when you decide to look fear in the eye and say, "You no longer get to decide how I live." You were not created to be ruled by dread. You were created to walk boldly in purpose, to stretch your potential beyond what you thought possible. So how do you let go of fear? First, identify it by name. What exactly are you afraid of? Name it clearly. Vagueness is fear's ally. Clarity is its enemy. Second, challenge the narrative. Ask yourself, is this fear based on facts or feelings? Most fears have no evidence to support them, only emotion. You, as a Jew, third, take small, courageous steps. Action is the antidote to anxiety. The longer you wait, the stronger fear becomes, but every time you act in spite of it, it loses its hold over you. Fourth, surround yourself with voices of faith, not fear. You can't overcome what you keep feeding. Refuse to keep company with people who magnify your insecurities. Finally, remember that your purpose is bigger than your comfort. You were not designed to stay safe and hidden. You were designed to live fully and boldly. Fear is the invisible chain that quietly limits your destiny and potential. You can't always see it, but you can feel it. It shows up as hesitation when an opportunity comes your way, as an excuse when a challenge appears, and as a voice that says, "What if you fail?" It doesn't need to roar or scream to control you. All it needs is your agreement, your silent consent to remain stuck in the same place while life moves forward without you. From the time you were a child, you learned to be afraid. Some of those fears were meant to protect you: fear of touching fire, fear of falling from heights. But as you grew, fear began to take other forms. It became the fear of embarrassment, the fear of rejection, the fear of not being enough. These are the chains that are hardest to see because they don't live outside you. They live in your thoughts and your beliefs. You carry them everywhere you go, believing they are simply part of who you are, but they are not you. They are only stories you've told yourself so many times that you've started believing them. Every time you want to take a step forward, these invisible chains pull you back. You tell yourself you're not ready yet. You convince yourself the timing isn't right. You wait for a sign, for some assurance that everything will be safe, that there is no risk of pain or failure. But life doesn't work that way. The reality is, you will never have perfect conditions, and you will never know exactly how things will turn out. If you keep waiting for certainty, you will wait your whole life, and you will never taste the fullness of your potential. These chains limit your destiny because they create a false boundary around what you believe is possible for you. You start to accept a smaller life, not because you are incapable of more, but because you are afraid to find out what would happen if you tried. You settle for relationships that don't inspire you, jobs that don't challenge you, and routines that don't grow you. You tell yourself you are being practical, but deep down you know you are being ruled by fear. Potential is not something you unlock by accident. It is something you must claim by choice. And that choice requires you to confront the invisible barriers you've allowed to surround you. It means asking yourself uncomfortable questions. What would I do if I wasn't afraid? What dreams have I hidden away because I was too scared to fail? What part of my life am I shrinking so I don't have to face my own insecurity? When you start to see fear for what it is, a chain, not an unchangeable reality, you begin to understand that you hold the key to your own freedom. You have the power to unlock your destiny by refusing to let fear make your decisions. You have the power to transform your life by daring to believe that you are capable of far more than you've allowed yourself to experience. Your destiny is too important to let fear keep you in bondage. The dreams you carry, the gifts you possess, the impact you are meant to have, these are all waiting on the other side of your courage. You don't have to be fearless to be free. You only have to be willing to act in spite of fear, to take the step that scares you, to speak the truth you've been avoiding, to embrace the unknown with faith that something greater is possible. The invisible chain loses its strength the moment you refuse to let it define your future. When you decide that fear will no longer be your master, you unlock a life of purpose, growth, and true fulfillment. This choice is yours, and it will transform everything. Transformation begins the moment you challenge the lies fear has taught you. Most people don't realize how many of their beliefs are shaped by fear disguised as wisdom. You hear phrases like, be realistic, don't get your hopes up, stay in your lane, and you think you are protecting yourself from disappointment. But underneath those cautious words is the deeper lie, that you are not worthy of extraordinary possibilities. This is how fear operates. It hides behind what sounds reasonable so you don't question it. You accept limitations that were never meant for you, and you build your life around them, thinking you are simply being prudent. But transformation cannot happen while you are loyal to these lies. As long as you let them speak unchallenged, you will continue to shrink yourself to fit inside the boundaries they create. You will settle for less, because you have convinced yourself that less is all you deserve. The moment you start to question those messages, everything begins to change. When you look at a fear-based belief and ask, is this actually true? You strip away its power. Most of the time, you will discover that the things you fear are either exaggerated or completely imagined. Think about how many opportunities you have turned down because you believed you weren't ready. How many relationships you avoided because you believed you weren't lovable enough. How many ideas you abandoned because you believed you weren't smart enough to see them through. None of those beliefs were facts. They were only stories fear told you over and over until you stopped resisting them. Challenging the lies of fear is not about ignoring risk or pretending that obstacles don't exist. It is about refusing to let your imagination become a prison. The truth is, you will face challenges no matter what path you choose. Playing small doesn't spare you from pain. It only guarantees regret. Living courageously doesn't remove uncertainty, but it gives you the chance to discover what you are truly capable of. Transformation starts with a simple but powerful decision: to stop agreeing with fear, to stop assuming that every fearful thought deserves your loyalty. You are not obligated to believe everything that enters your mind. Just because you feel afraid doesn't mean you are in danger. Just because you doubt yourself doesn't mean you lack ability. Just because you have failed before doesn't mean you are destined to fail again. These are the lies that must be challenged if you want to grow. When you begin to question fear's authority, you open the door to a life of possibility. You start to see how many of your limits were never real. You discover that your potential was never as small as your fears insisted. You realize that courage is not something only other people have. It is a choice you can make every single day. This is where transformation takes root, not in the absence of fear, but in the refusal to let fear keep writing your story. When you challenge the lies, you reclaim your power. You stop being a passive observer of your own life and become an active creator of it. You begin to build a future based on truth and faith rather than doubt and avoidance. No one can do this inner work for you. It is your responsibility to confront the false beliefs that have shaped your decisions. But the reward for that work is freedom. It is the ability to move forward without constantly second-guessing your worth. It is the clarity to see what is possible and the strength to pursue it boldly. Transformation begins the moment you decide that fear no longer deserves your agreement. It is in that moment that your life starts to expand. And it is in that moment that you finally begin to become who you were always meant to be. Fear thrives in darkness and secrecy. It gains strength when you pretend it isn't there, when you avoid acknowledging how much power it has over you. Many people go through life denying their fear because they think it makes them look weak or unprepared. But the truth is, fear grows most when it is hidden. It becomes a quiet, controlling force, shaping your decisions, your habits, and even your relationships without your conscious awareness. When you expose fear to the light of honest reflection, it begins to lose its grip. Acknowledgement is not the same as surrender. To admit you are afraid does not mean you have failed. In fact, it is the first courageous step toward freedom. When you are willing to say, "This scares me," you separate yourself from the fear. You become the observer rather than the prisoner. You begin to see fear as an experience you are having, not the essence of who you are. Think about the fears you rarely speak aloud. The fear of not measuring up, the fear of disappointing your family, the fear of making a mistake so big you can never recover. These hidden fears quietly influence every area of your life. They make you hesitant when you should be decisive. They keep you quiet when you have something important to say. They make you overthink every action until you paralyze yourself with self-doubt. By bringing these fears into the light, you disarm them. You take away their ability to operate in the shadows. This process requires honesty. It means sitting alone with your thoughts and naming exactly what you are afraid of, without minimizing it or justifying it. It means saying to yourself, "I'm afraid of failing," or "I'm afraid of being alone," or "I'm afraid I am not good enough." That moment of clarity is powerful because it shows you the gap between your fear and reality. Most of the time, when you look closely at fear, you discover it is built on assumptions, not facts. You assume that if you fail, you will never recover. You assume that if you speak up, you will be rejected. You assume that if you try something new, you will embarrass yourself beyond repair. But how many of those assumptions are based on evidence? How many of them have actually happened? And even if they did, would they truly be as catastrophic as your imagination insists? Honest reflection forces you to confront these questions. It challenges you to separate your true values and aspirations from the distorted stories fear tells. When you do this, you gain perspective. You realize that fear is often just an emotional reaction, not an accurate forecast of your future. It also helps to remember that everyone feels afraid. You are not uniquely broken or incapable because you experience fear. The difference between people who grow and people who stay stuck is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to face it with openness and curiosity. Those who succeed are often those who have learned to sit with fear, examine it, and move forward anyway. When you shine light on your fears, you begin to reclaim the parts of yourself that have been hidden or suppressed. You find courage you didn't know you had. You discover dreams you buried under layers of self-protection. You learn that fear can only define your life if you refuse to acknowledge it. The act of bringing fear into the light is an act of self-respect. It is saying, I deserve to live fully, not cautiously. It is choosing growth over safety, purpose over comfort, and truth over illusion. In this simple but profound choice, you begin to transform your life. Because nothing loses power faster than fear, exposed to the light of your honest attention, and nothing frees you more completely than the decision to look your fear in the face and refuse to let it dictate who you will become. The life you want is always on the other side of the fear you refuse to confront. Fear has a way of constructing invisible walls around your potential. These walls are not made of real obstacles, but of imagined catastrophes, old wounds, and inherited beliefs that you never pause to question. Because fear is convincing. It feels so real in the body, the racing heart, the shallow breath, the tightening in your stomach, that you mistake those sensations for evidence that you are truly in danger. But the truth is, most of the time you are only in danger of growing, of changing, of becoming more than you have been. Consider how fear has shaped your choices up to this moment. How many times have you talked yourself out of a dream because you thought you were not qualified enough or ready enough? How many times have you said no to an opportunity because you didn't want to feel uncomfortable or risk failing in front of others? How many times have you settled for relationships or environments that drained your spirit simply because you were afraid to step into the unknown? This is the high cost of fear. It trades your future for a temporary sense of safety. But you cannot transform your life by staying loyal to your fears. Transformation requires you to step beyond what feels familiar, even when your heart is pounding. You must be willing to stand at the edge of everything you've known and take the first step into what you cannot yet see. That is the very definition of courage. Not the absence of fear, but the determination to move forward while fear shouts its warnings in your ear. People often think they have to wait until they feel confident before they act. They imagine that someday they will wake up and the fear will be gone, replaced by perfect certainty and calm assurance. But that day never comes. Confidence is not the cause of action, it is the result of action. You only build it by proving to yourself that you can survive discomfort, that you can handle setbacks, that you can navigate the unknown and come out stronger. Every time you walk through fear, instead of running from it, you reclaim a piece of your freedom. You start to realize that fear is not the end of the road, it is the doorway to the life you were meant to live. The dream you keep imagining, the business you want to build, the relationship you want to nurture, the purpose you want to fulfill, will never feel completely safe. If it did, it wouldn't stretch you or teach you anything. The life you desire demands your growth, and growth is always accompanied by fear. You must also understand that fear does not mean stop. It means pay attention. It is your body's way of alerting you that you are crossing into unfamiliar territory. Instead of letting that alert turn into paralysis, use it as a signal that you are exactly where you should be, because the edges of your comfort zone are where your transformation begins. When you look back on your life years from now, you will not remember the moments you felt comfortable. You will remember the moments you were terrified and took action anyway. You will remember the times you risked failure and discovered strength. You will remember the days you said yes to your purpose instead of your fear. The life you want is waiting on the other side of your willingness to be brave. It is waiting on the other side of your decision to stop giving fear the final word. It is waiting on the other side of your choice to walk through the discomfort and claim the future that has always been yours to claim. Fear is an emotion that is part of being human, but it was never meant to be your master. It is like a messenger. Sometimes it warns you of real danger, but more often it simply signals that you are stepping into something new and uncertain. When you allow fear to drive your decisions, you hand over control of your life to a force that cares nothing for your growth or your dreams. Fear does not care about your purpose, your talents, or your destiny. It only wants to keep you small and safe. And the tragedy is that too many people spend their entire lives obeying it without realizing how much they have sacrificed in the process. When you let fear run your life, you start to see every risk as a threat and every possibility as a problem. You shrink your expectations, lower your standards, and convince yourself that mediocrity is wisdom. You tell yourself stories that justify staying where you are. It's not the right time. I don't have enough experience. Maybe next year. Over time, these stories become a prison you don't even see. You start to believe that caution is the same thing as responsibility, and that avoiding discomfort is the same thing as being smart. But the truth is, no great life was ever built on a foundation of fear. No meaningful purpose was ever fulfilled by hiding from challenge. Think of all the moments you've hesitated to speak up for yourself because you were afraid of conflict. All the times you held back your ideas because you feared criticism. All the opportunities you watched pass by because you didn't want to fail. Each of those moments seemed small at the time, but together they shaped the course of your life. Fear compounds over years and decades until it becomes your default response to anything new. If you don't challenge it, you will wake up one day with the painful realization that you never truly lived, only survived. Taking back control from fear begins with a decision. It is the decision to stop assuming that every anxious thought is a prophecy and every uncomfortable feeling is a warning. It is the decision to question your fear instead of obeying it. Ask yourself, what evidence do I have that this fear is true? What would I do if I were not afraid? What is the cost of staying safe compared to the cost of taking a risk? These questions break the trance of fear and put you back in the seat of authority over your own life. You will never completely eliminate fear, and you don't have to. You only have to stop giving it power over your choices. You only have to decide that your purpose matters more than your discomfort. You only have to believe that your potential deserves a chance to be expressed fully. Every time you act despite fear, you reclaim a little more of your freedom. You remind yourself that fear is not a command, it is only information. You get to decide what you will do with that information. You were never meant to be ruled by fear. You were meant to learn from it, to grow through it, and to rise above it. When you stop letting fear dictate the boundaries of your life, you step into the authority that has always been yours. You begin to design your future instead of merely reacting to your past. And in that place of courage and clarity, you finally discover what it feels like to live a life that is truly your own. Fear has a way of clouding your perception, making the unknown look like a guaranteed disaster. It magnifies what could go wrong and minimizes everything that could go right. But when you look closer, you will often find that the scariest thing is not what might happen if you try, it's what will definitely happen if you don't. You will stay stuck in the same patterns, repeating the same routines, living inside the same small story about who you are. The life you dream of does not just require courage, it demands that you cultivate faith. Faith in something bigger than your fear. Faith in the gifts placed inside you. Faith in the possibilities waiting on the other side of your decision to grow. Without faith, fear becomes the loudest voice in your head. It tells you that your past failures define you, that you are not enough, that you will never change. It convinces you to play it safe, to delay your dreams, to hide behind excuses that sound responsible but are really just fear in disguise. Faith is what interrupts this pattern. It is the quiet but steady assurance that no matter how uncertain the path looks, there is purpose in your journey. It is the belief that you were created for more than survival and that you are equipped to handle the challenges that come with growth. Sometimes people confuse faith with arrogance, but it is not arrogance to trust that your life has meaning. It is not arrogance to believe that you have gifts worth sharing. It is humility to acknowledge that you did not create those gifts, but you have a responsibility to develop and use them. Faith allows you to honor the potential you were given instead of burying it beneath layers of doubt. When you refuse to believe in yourself, you are not just being cautious, you are withholding the very thing the world needs from you. To cultivate faith, you must be intentional about what you feed your mind. You cannot expect to rise above fear if you constantly rehearse negative scenarios and surround yourself with voices that only echo your doubts. You must choose to focus on what is possible, to seek out stories of resilience, to remind yourself of the times you have already overcome. Every success, no matter how small, is evidence that you are capable of growth. Every moment you have survived disappointment is proof that you are stronger than your fear would have you believe. Faith is also built by taking action. You cannot think your way into courage. You must practice it. Even the smallest step forward creates momentum. When you do the thing you are afraid of, you send a message to your mind that fear is not the ultimate authority. Each act of faith chips away at the illusion that you must have certainty before you begin. You start to realize that clarity comes through movement, not before it. When you choose faith over fear, you don't eliminate risk, but you do eliminate regret. You give yourself the chance to discover what is possible. You give yourself permission to outgrow the version of you that settled for comfort. And you create space for transformation to happen in ways you could never predict while standing on the sideline. Faith does not promise that everything will be easy or that you will never feel afraid again. It simply insists that your fear is not the end of the story. It calls you to trust that there is something more on the other side of your hesitation, more freedom, more purpose, more fulfillment. When you step forward with faith, you honor the life you have been given. You stop letting fear dictate your future, and you finally begin to live from a place of possibility instead of limitation. Fear thrives in isolation. When you keep your worries, doubts, and insecurities locked inside your mind, they grow louder and stronger. You replay worst-case scenarios, you magnify small risks into looming disasters, and you convince yourself that no one else could possibly understand what you are going through. This is exactly how fear keeps you trapped. It isolates you, not only from other people, but from the truth about who you are and what you are capable of overcoming. One of the most powerful ways to disarm fear is to bring it into the light by connecting with others who can support you, challenge you, and remind you of your strength. People often underestimate the importance of community when they are trying to transform their lives. You may think that breaking free from fear is something you must accomplish on your own, as if asking for help is a sign of weakness. But the opposite is true. Vulnerability is a mark of courage. It takes strength to admit that you are struggling and that you need encouragement or accountability. When you open up to trusted people about your fears, you immediately reduce their power. What felt overwhelming in the darkness starts to look smaller and more manageable in the light of honest conversation. The right relationships will not just comfort you, they will call you higher. The people who genuinely care about you will not let you settle for a life dictated by fear. They will challenge your excuses and remind you of your vision when you forget it. They will speak truth to you when your mind is clouded by self-doubt. These relationships act like mirrors. reflecting back to you the potential you sometimes cannot see in yourself. And when your courage falters, they will lend you theirs until you can stand strong again. But not all connections are created equal. It is important to be intentional about who you allow to speak into your life. Fear is contagious, and if you spend most of your time around people who only see obstacles, you will start to adopt their mindset. Seek out relationships with people who have faced their own fears and decided to keep moving forward. Surround yourself with those who value growth over comfort, purpose over approval, and action over hesitation. Their example will inspire you to stretch beyond your limitations and step into the unknown with faith instead of dread. Building a supportive community also means you must be willing to invest in others. Encouragement is not a one-way street. As you share your journey, you will discover that your experiences and insights can help someone else rise above their own fear. You do not need to be perfect or have everything figured out to be an encouragement. Your honesty and your willingness to keep going, even when you are scared, can be the very thing someone else needs to witness to believe change is possible. When you show up for others, you also reinforce your own commitment to growth. Connection is a form of accountability. When you declare your intentions to another person, to start a new project, to leave a toxic environment, to pursue a goal you have been avoiding, you create a sense of responsibility. You are less likely to retreat back into fear when someone else knows what you are aiming for and believes in your capacity to achieve it. This shared commitment keeps you moving forward on the days when fear tries hardest to convince you to give up. Fear cannot survive where there is love, support, and truth. When you are willing to step out of isolation and into connection, you reclaim power over your life. You remember that you are not alone, that your challenges are not unique or insurmountable, and that you have resources beyond your own strength. In community, you find perspective, courage, and the energy to keep growing. And as you build those connections, you will see that fear loses its grip when you choose to walk this journey together instead of trying to conquer it alone. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else matters more. Too often, people wait for fear to completely disappear before they act, believing that they must feel confident and unshakable to take a step forward. But if you wait until you feel no fear, you will stay in the same place forever. Fear is a natural response to stepping into the unknown. It signals that you are moving beyond what is familiar and predictable. Instead of interpreting that feeling as a reason to stop, you can choose to see it as evidence that you are growing. Transformation begins the moment you decide that your desire for a meaningful life outweighs your desire for comfort. Small steps are the path to big change. When you hear the word courage, you might picture grand, heroic gestures. Quitting your job overnight, moving to a new city, starting a business with nothing but a dream. But more often, courage looks much quieter and less dramatic. It is having one honest conversation that you have been avoiding. It is showing up for a commitment even when you feel inadequate. It is saying yes to an opportunity before you feel fully prepared. Small acts of bravery build momentum and rewire your mind to believe that you can trust yourself to act even when you are afraid. Each time you take action, no matter how small, you disrupt the cycle of fear. Fear feeds on inaction. The longer you wait, the bigger it grows in your imagination. You replay all the things that could go wrong, and you begin to doubt your capacity to handle even the smallest risk. But the moment you move, even a little, you break the illusion that fear is in control. You create proof that you are capable of acting in spite of uncertainty. This proof becomes the foundation for greater courage in the future. You learn that fear is a feeling, not a prophecy. It does not have to predict your results or define your story. You may never feel completely ready. That is normal. Growth is inherently uncomfortable because it stretches you beyond the limits you have known. But readiness is not a feeling you wait for. It is a decision you make. You decide to trust that you will learn along the way, that you can adapt to challenges, and that you are strong enough to face whatever comes. When you do this, you reclaim your power from fear. You are no longer waiting for perfect conditions to act. You are moving forward because your life matters too much to be put on hold. Action also clarifies what fear distorts. When you stay stuck in your mind, everything feels exaggerated and confusing. But when you take a step, even a small one, you gain information. You see what is actually true instead of what you imagined. Maybe the risk was smaller than you thought. Maybe you discover new resources and allies. Maybe you realize that failure is not fatal, but simply a lesson that refines you for the next attempt. Clarity is born from experience, not from endless analysis. You are more capable than your fear suggests. You have survived challenges you once thought would break you. You have adapted to changes you never planned for. You have learned skills you once knew nothing about. And you will continue to grow stronger every time you decide to move, even when your heart is racing and your doubts are loud. Courage is built in action, one small, imperfect step at a time. When you look back on your life, it will not be the moments of comfort you remember most. It will be the moments when you chose to act in the face of fear, when you risked rejection, when you tried something new, when you dared to believe you were made for more. Those moments define you. They shape your character and expand what you believe is possible. So take the first step, and then the next. Your future is waiting, and every act of courage brings you closer to the life you were meant to live. Today is the day you stop letting fear dictate the boundaries of your life. Imagine how different your relationships, your work, your destiny would look if fear no longer made your decisions for you. Don't wait for the perfect moment. There is none. The future you want begins the second you decide that your faith in what's possible is stronger than your fear of what might go wrong. Release your grip on fear. Watch your life transform in ways you never believed were possible. Because freedom isn't just an idea, it's a choice. And that choice belongs to you.